Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. Happy Easter Monday to everyone. This is your girl, Marcy, here for another awesome BGC book club event. So I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes and see who all joins the room for tonight. And when you come on in the room, please do let us know where you're from and who's here and where you're from, so we can get an idea of who's joining us tonight for this great discussion with the one and only Donna Hill. So I do see about 10 folks in the room. Welcome, welcome. Happy Easter Monday for those of you all who celebrate Easter. I know I'm in the Atlanta area and traffic was light today, so I guess there are a lot of people who are still enjoying an extra day off. So that was nice. So welcome to the BGC Book Club, Book of the Month for April. So thank you so much for joining us. It looks like we got quite a few people in the room. So I know we're all busy on a Monday night. So I am not going to delay the greatness that awaits us. And let me go ahead and start by introducing our guest for the evening, the author of Confessions in B Flat, Donna Hill. Donna Hill is a multi-published author with more than 90 titles to her credit, 3 of which have been adapted for television. She is considered one of the early pioneers of the African-American romance genre, a career that began when her first story was published in Black Romance magazine in 1987. She's a mother and a grandmother, and currently assistant professor of professional writing at Medgar Evers College in her hometown of New York City. And without any further delay, I'm going to go ahead and bring Ms. Donna Hill on in the room. Welcome, welcome.
Hey, Marcy, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm so blessed and honored to have you here with us this evening. Looks like we've got someone here from Naples, Florida. Paula is joining us from Illinois. So welcome, welcome. So, wow, as I said, consider it an honor to have you here. An author has written 90 books. All books, or books, a combination of books and just stories in general?
It's a combination. I think there's, I don't know, maybe like 60 standalone books.
Okay.
Then there are all of the collections, because I think it's like over 100 titles altogether that I've actually written. And some of them are in anthologies and some of them are standalone novels. So.
Awesome. Well, that is definitely an honor. I'm sure there are going to be some people on here. If we have some time at the end, just want to talk a little bit about writing, because I'm sure there are some writers or wannabe writers in the room, and you may be able to offer some tips, especially in your genre, because you are one of the pioneers. So just, and everyone who's joining us, if you have any questions or anything you want to ask about the book as we go through it, please feel free to drop your questions in the comments, because it's important. And I'm sure I want to hear from you, and I'm sure Donna would like to hear your thoughts as well. So, Confessions in B Flat. I really enjoyed this book a lot. I read it like real quickly because it's a good read. It was nice to get through and just to see the way that you put the story together. Now, one of the things, of course, for those of you who have read it, the story is of a couple, one who is a Southerner, who is a follower of Martin Luther King. The other is a Northerner, a native New Yorker, like Ms. Donna is, who is all about celebrating Malcolm X, and how the two of them come together and work through meeting and dating, relating, mating, all of that good stuff. So with all of the stories that you've told over time, what was it that made you want to talk about the 60s specifically, and 60s in New York at this particular time?
Wow. The sort of the genesis for Confessions in B Flat happened like over a decade ago. The idea for the story originally just started off as a title, And that's pretty much all I knew. It was B flat. Mm-hmm. And I had this idea in my head that, I want to write a story about, the community comes together like every Friday night and chops it up about what's going on and the issues, and they come to apartment B. So that was B flat, and that's all I knew. And I kind of like let it go. And years later, when I was doing my graduate work, I was doing my thesis project was about this family who had traveled from the South. They came north, what that life was like for them in, current times. And so it was a generational story, but it was also a story about gentrification and things like that. Mm-hmm. So that stayed with me a bit as well. And, I'm writing other things in between. And this idea came to me years ago as well, that I wanted to write this story about a twist on Romeo and Juliet, right? So everybody that understands the Romeo and Juliet trope, it's, two lovers, tragic, and they're separated by their families. Mm-hmm. But I knew that I didn't want to use families as a reason why my characters couldn't be together. It had to be something more important. And, over, the past, few years, I've just really become really sort of like a news and political buff. And being a child of the 60s, living here in New York, all of the things sort of like came together piece by piece. So it wasn't that one day I sat down and said, I'm going to write this book called Confessions in B flat, and it's going to be about blah, blah, blah. So it was over a period of time that the pieces sort of tumbled into place, from the title to the concept to, who it could be. And then once I decided that, I wanted it to have some sort of, political frame. I know that one of the most important episodes in Black history was the Civil Rights Movement. And what if I placed my characters there during that time? What would that be like? And so that became, the foundation for the story. And then, of course, just then deciding, okay, so what about them? Like if it's not going to be their families that separate them, it will be their politics. And so one follows Malcolm and one follows Martin. And again, I didn't want it to be so simple that you would think that our female character would be a follower of Martin.
You would.
A follower of Malcolm, and I didn't want to do that, so I switched that as well. And so when I looked at the things that I wanted to divide them, it was demographics, it was ideologies, and just their whole upbringing were the things that made them different. But the thing that brought them together was a common goal. And that common goal was the betterment of, our people. They went about it in different ways and they had a different perspective, but they both wanted the same thing. So, so then the story started to gel about how I wanted to put it together. And then, I started going back and doing pieces of research that I needed. A lot of it, I remember myself, and, the places and things like that, the locations, the Lenox Lounge that's in the book is a real place. It's right across the street from B flat. So, those things are real. The Apollo, of course, Abyssinian Baptist Church, Pascal's Restaurant in Atlanta. So all of these things, so that gave some sort of reality to these pieces of fiction. And of course you have, the major characters that played a role, specifically like John Lewis, who inspired my male character to pursue this dream.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I really enjoyed, just reading through all of that history. As we were saying before we got online, I was telling you how a couple of years ago, I had a chance, more than a couple of years, but a few years ago, I had a chance to go to Harlem. And it was just so great to be able to, in my mind, even though, as we were saying, Harlem is different now than it was then, I could still say, okay, yeah, I saw the Apollo and I remember being on 125th and I remember, doing these things. I don't think you mentioned the Schomburg because it might not have been there then, but I do, remember seeing all these places, the Schomburg, going by Abyssinian, all of those things. So it was really great to see that and kind of feel myself in the place of those characters, even though it was several years later. So I thought that was great. One of our folks here is saying that they've been a fan. They've loved your books ever since. Their aunt gave them all access to her Arabesque books one summer when I was a teenager. All right. Well, good to have some fans in the room. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one of the things that you've already kind of touched on it, that the characters, they were kind of different than what you would think to have a female character, especially at that time in the 60s. And she was just, I want to say, kind of Angela Davis-like, just in her appearance, the things she described of her appearance and just the way that she carried herself. And she was all about, the by any means necessary. And I really like the fact that you did make the female character the one who would be considered more militant, because if you look at what's happening now, and you touch on this at the beginning of the book, the things that are going on now with us and getting out and being activists and things like that, it's women that are leading the way, with Black Lives Matter and a lot of these other things that are coming up. So I really like that this character, the character of Anita, was kind of an homage to that as well, kind of what we've seen happen nowadays. So
yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, bringing in John Lewis, who we know we lost not too long ago. And of course, you would have already been writing the book at the prior to that. So it's also, by including him in the book, in the story, it also pays homage to him and his life and the way that we know that he touched a lot of people up until the time of his passing. So that was really good to do that as well. Now, one of the things, of course, you were able to incorporate a lot of historical things into the story. I think one of the first things that we actually saw was about the bombing in Birmingham of the church. Mm-hmm. What types of things did you have to do in terms? I know there's some things that are like general knowledge, but were there other things that you had to like really dig deep into to get more details about what happened with some of the historical events that you mentioned?
Well, the bombing, of course, I still did, the basic research because I had to define my timeline. Like, I knew that my story was going to begin in 1963. And so how far out would it go? It goes out to like 68 about. So what events happened within that time frame? And so I began my research that way. And I knew that I wanted to start it off with something impactful. And so what was one of those things? And one of those things during that time was the bombing of the church. And so that's sort of like, a few pages in, that's kind of like where we get to. So that I had to look up things like, how much this stuff cost.
Right.
Basic things and, stuff that I remember growing up, like even the music, like in my mind, I may say, well, the Four Tops, they sang blah, 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 but they didn't sing it until 69, like after the story was over. So, I had to, like backtrack and track things like that. The different speeches, like Malcolm's speech that's contained in the book. I had to research that. When did that happen? When was Angela Davis at Berkeley? Adam Clayton Powell Jr.'s speech at Abyssinian Baptist Church. That was a real speech.
Right.
And, so I had to research things like that. And so, the riot that happened in Harlem and spilled over into Brooklyn, that really happened. And just looking at, those different pieces, there's another piece in there about Burdell's record shop. So Burdell's is a real place.
It's a real place, okay.
Yes, I used to go to Burdell's all the time to get my music. And, people would come from Harlem because back in the day, Burdell's used to also sell tickets to the different shows. And, so, you would go to the shows at like the Apollo, or you go to, back then we used to have, big, these mini concerts in movie theaters. Okay. And so people would come to Burdell's to get tickets. They would get their music, like he would put, different pieces of music together on cassette tapes for people, classics, gospel, everything. And they were still open up until probably about maybe 4 years ago. I think they finally closed.
Oh, wow. And
yeah.
Now, so.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So that was a real place. And where they go, where Anita and Jason go to get pizza when she takes him to Brooklyn, on the train for the first time. That pizza parlor is really there. It's still there, actually, right there on the corner of Nostrand. So there's a lot of, reality stuff that's in there. I had to do, like, they got on the train for the first time. So like now here in New York, I don't know what you'll do in Georgia, but we have like a card. So it's called a Metro card, and you sort of like swipe it. That's how you get on the train. I couldn't do that back then because it didn't exist. So they used tokens. So they were little tiny tokens that you would sort of like drop in a slot, and they were about as big as a dime. So I had to look up stuff like that. So, it was interesting. It was really great to, look for all of these little details and, things like that. And, I had to kind of fudge a few things to kind of make everything fit the way that I wanted it to. But for the most part, everything was pretty, straightforward. The Vietnam War, why that was important. I thought that was important to include as well. So, yeah. So it was interesting.
Right. And one thing, for those of you who haven't had a chance to read the book, please do, number one. Number two, she does include there's some pictures in here, like real world pictures, historical pictures. There are links to where you can go and look up more information or listen to some of the speeches and things that she mentioned. So it's not just, it's a great romantic story. However, you can learn something. And I really, appreciate the fact of learning some things and getting a new light shed on some different events in our history. So in the book, this couple meets on the heels of the Birmingham bombing, and early on they realize that there's an attraction, but they also early on realize that they're very different. So what I liked is that it's almost like they fell in love or interest, at least at first sight. So I thought that was just really interesting, because otherwise, he's on his way to, Jason is on his way to New York to basically set up shop for the nonviolent movement and things like that. Otherwise there may not have been a way for them to connect, just because they were on such different paths. So I thought that it was, they saw each other, they liked each other, and it was kind of like, I'm not sure. I don't know why I'm kind of feeling this person that I really don't know. But then them being able to reconnect and, ultimately embark on a relationship. And one of the things I do like the way that I mean, it's a real thing, because I think about sometimes, let's say if a person is a Republican and a Democrat, and it's like, and you hear, you hear those stories every now and again where two people come together and they just seem to be so different in different approaches. So I really, that was good. And also it gave you the opportunity to be able to teach us more about what the differences were, the differences and the similarities. Because as you've already mentioned, and you'll find in the book when you read it, that basically they wanted the same things. It was just different ways of going about those things. And even no matter what you know about Dr. King or Malcolm X, you will see that folks, they even realized that they wanted the same things, but different ways of going about those same things.
Yeah.
Which is something we often encounter in our own relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's always more than one way to do something, right?
Absolutely. And one of the other things I really loved is that you did, even though the families weren't the reason why they weren't together, I like the fact that, oh, I'm sorry, somebody's asking the title of the book. I can put that up for you. Give me a second. But even though the families weren't the reason for the issues that they were having, I do like the fact that you included the families in the story so that you could get a better idea of who these characters were, kind of where they came from, how they got to be where they were, and even within their family, there were similarities, because like I think in both cases the dads really didn't go to church that much, and in both cases the moms were into the church, which oftentimes that happens as well. As additional characters in the story, how important was it for you to have the parents have intact relationships?
Oh, I thought that was extremely important. I wanted to be able to demonstrate the beauty of Black families. Like, we're not all dysfunctional. We are not, this, and having an intact Black family is not an anomaly, right? There's probably more of those than not. And that doesn't get to be seen, we're always, projected as sort of like this dysfunction, and everybody comes from, we all come from broken homes and, 50 different siblings and blah, blah, blah. So I really wanted to show the beauty and the strength of a Black family, what that was, and how the love of their love helped to strengthen my main characters and make them who they were, and that they both had examples to strive for, right? Jason had his family and Anita had her family, and they both wanted that same kind of thing. So I thought it was like really important to be able to show that the parents weren't dead or divorced or hated each other, or Jason never knew who his father was, and all that kind of stuff. So I thought in this case it was important to show them.
Absolutely, and giving them the example. And quite honestly, if we look at historically during that time frame, you probably saw a lot more intact families in that time frame anyway. It was more of where we were prior to a lot of the systems and things that came into play that made it more challenging for families to be together and remain together. So it was definitely good to see that. And, to have their parents kind of checking in and, like, what are you doing? What's going on? And, also giving advice and helping their children along the way. Now, of course, in any story, there's always going to be those things that happen that cause people to be at odds above and beyond just, the obvious thing of them having different ideas. There's a point in the story where basically, I actually think it's a couple times that they kind of split up or, go their separate ways and come back together. And then at a certain point, I guess what we would think would be the end of the story is when Jason goes off to join the military. And that is a big thing because, of course, as a proponent of Malcolm X and all the things that Anita was into, going to serve the country that doesn't serve you would definitely, be a thing that she wouldn't be able to stand behind. How important was it for you to include, not so much from the standpoint of breaking them up, but just talking about the war? Because it doesn't sound like he was drafted. It sounds like he chose to go.
Yeah, he enlisted, and that's kind of what totally blew Anita's mind. It's like, what are you doing? And even as he was a proponent of nonviolence, he totally believed that injustice was injustice, and he was going to fight for justice for the South Vietnamese, and he felt that it was his duty. That's what he had to do. Even at the risk of losing Anita, he wanted her to be able to understand his decision, and she understood to a degree, but she didn't agree with it.
Right.
She understood that this is something that he had to do. As a man, just that she is driven by her own, passions and belief systems, but she has her own other reasons for him not wanting to go either. But
right,
you can't talk about that. But
we're gonna keep some things to ourselves. You have to read it if you haven't read it. Well, just kind of a sidebar, because of course one of the things, the B flat is the place where Anita works, and not only does she work there as a waitress, she's also a poet, spoken word artist, which is one of the things, because I was thinking, is she going Love Jones on us? But you didn't go Love Jones on us. But it made me think of that, think of the Love Jones type of situation. And I do know that there are a lot of places like that in New York. There were then, and still now. But for you as a writer, I know that you primarily do novels and short stories and things of that nature. How was it for you as the author or writer to write poetry for Anita?
It was different. It was challenging. I fancied myself a poet before I was a novelist.
Gotcha.
When I was coming up, that's what I wrote was poetry. I was, the teenager always in crisis and pouring myself out in poetry. I wrote a lot of poetry about, the Vietnam War. So, I thought I was a poet, but then I never really pursued it as I found, a greater passion in writing, longer pieces. And so I kind of put that on the back burner for years. And when I began developing Anita, I found that it wasn't going to be enough just for me to say she was a poet. And so I could have easily said, oh, she went up on the stage and, everybody loved her and she took her bows and got off. It could have been that. But I wanted her to be that three-dimensional person. And this is her voice. And this is her way of, expressing the things that are happening in her world and in the world in general, and her own life and, her own sensibilities. And so I thought it was really important to actually write poetry for her to reflect different points of time, throughout the novel. So yeah, it was fun, because it was like, okay, like how does this, because I'd like 2 days of the semester when I'm teaching that, there's the essay section, there's the poetry section, there's the drama section throughout the semester. So you have to do poetry anyway. And, my students are much better than I am when it comes to that, because they're like totally into it. I'm just like, okay, whatever, sounds good. But, you know, so I had to like really think about how do you, you know, organizing it. And, you know, I knew I wasn't going to do, you know, roses are red, violets are blue kind of thing, you know, rhyming, you know, and so having studied different forms and things like that, and just looking at, you know, different ways to approach it. But I knew that it had to have, you know, a certain kind of rhythm, you know, to each piece. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was good because I'm like, oh wow, okay, these are some good poems. The poems are good as well, so that's great. And as you said, it allowed her to have another dimension, you know, as an artist, and we got a chance to see some things about her life and that she may have had reason to write about or to emote or, and, you know, kind of see what her process is. You do share that in the book, as well as how she, you know, goes into her quiet space and and starts writing and things like that. So what I also really enjoyed in the story is the fact that, you know, she was introducing Jason to a lot of new things, even though, you know, he had his experiences, you know, in Hotlanta, which is where I currently reside. He had his experience. It was just totally different for him to be a New Yorker and to ride that subway, and at a certain point to take his first plane ride, and, you know, all these sorts of things. So that was just really good. Also, in a lot of ways in the relationship, she was the one kind of letting him know what she wanted, where he was kind of, you know, so that seemed somewhat true to form. You think, okay, yeah, she's real. You know, I'm gonna go for what I want, and he's like,
Are you not like the girls back home?
Right? Yeah, she was not like the girls back home. So yeah, that was good. That was definitely good to see that. Now, everyone who's here, if you have any questions that you want to ask of Ms. Hill, please do. This is our conversation, so I'm just kind of leading the way, but definitely if you have any questions about the story or anything, please feel free to ask while we have her here with us, because it is indeed an honor. So, okay, somebody from South Carolina. Okay, that's Columbia, South Carolina. I might know who that is, a family friend. So now, do you ever think, well, I'm not sure, do you ever do sequels? Will there ever be a sequel to this story?
Originally, when I had the contract, the sequel was supposed to have been Anita and Jason, like years later, opening a sort of like a bed and breakfast where they sort of become the cupids for their guests that come. And so that was the original idea. And as we were thinking about it, it's like, I don't know. And I happened to go online one day, and one of my very good friends and colleague was doing a series almost identical to it. And it's the same thing that I was going to call it. I was like, I called my editors up. I was like, no, we can't do this. We have to do something else. Mm-hmm. So this doesn't have a sequel. It just, you know, everybody just has to be happy that they've, you know, they go off and walk off into the sunset and everything's going to be fine. You know, whatever stamp of, you know, approval you want to put on it, that's it. But so the next book has totally nothing to do with them, like at all. Mm-hmm. Like I've done some sequels and, you know, series, you know, throughout my career, but for this particular book, there won't be one.
And that's fair, because sometimes I think that when you see a sequel, whether it's a film or whatever the case may be, it loses something, because people fall in love with the character, and then it's like sometimes you feel like they're just trying to throw them into stuff just so you can have another story. So I mean that's fair, you know, that is definitely fair. I think if anything, maybe a prequel, because the parents just had such great stories.
Yeah,
the parents have great stories. So
yeah, it's interesting because the parents are combinations of the characters that was in my graduate thesis.
okay.
characters, Cecilia and her husband, are composites of the parents of Jason and Anita. So I them out of that and move them over here. So some of their experiences are mirrored in the book, so that I took them from there and used them for that. The character Leon, who was Anita's first love, was actually in the original thesis, my graduate work. So he was a character there. And that relationship, it wasn't Anita, it was another character that I kind of like took that and built around it. And Leon became her person.
Gotcha.
Life.
Yeah, someone's saying, don't give away too much they didn't finish. We're not.
We don't do those spoilers.
Nope, we want those who have not finished or haven't had a chance to start. We want you to be able to read it and not have no spoilers. I mean, because some of the things you can kind of get an idea just based upon what the story is about. But yeah, we're not giving away all the good stuff.
Right.
Also, well, one of the things that I mentioned in your bio, you've had the opportunity to do some screenwriting as well, or have some of your things turned into screen things on film, I believe at BET. So is that something that you're continuing to work on as well?
Not at the moment. The BET experience was just that, the BET experience.
Gotcha.
There
are other content creators nowadays, though.
Yes, yes. It looks good on my resume. 3 books made into movies for television. Yay! So like right now, one of my novels, Getting Hers, has been optioned. It's been optioned for a while, so we're looking to see what happens with that. We'll see what happens with Confessions in B flat, but me personally, I'm not actively pursuing that line, and I find that even writing a screenplay, which is 120 pages tops, that's harder to do than writing a novel. It just is. It's a different mindset, and you have to write the way that you would write a play, and there's parameters that you have to think about, and who walks in, so and so walks in the room, and then so and so speaks. So it's a different kind of thing. And there's so much that you have to leave out, because in a novel, you can get into the characters' thoughts and why they did things and all sorts of stuff like that you can explore in a novel. You can't do that in a screenplay. You have to figure out how their physical movements and what their dialogue is going to express, to be able to kind of like get into their heads and figure out what the characters, what the character is like. So it's not as easy as it seems. At least it's not for me. Some people can write screenplays.
Someone is agreeing with me here. Confessions in B flat should definitely be a movie. The writing was superb. Yes.
Well, thank you very much for your.
Yes, we are putting it out there in the atmosphere, okay?
Put it out in the atmosphere for real.
Yes, because I mean, it really was what it kind of puts me in the mind of. It's a film that was out not too long ago, Sylvie's Love, but just like the period, piece of it. So yeah, I could definitely see that. I'm going to scroll some of your information here so people know how to get in touch with you. But yeah, I could definitely see that, but I say get someone who can help you with that and not take away from the story. That's the key thing. That is the key.
Yeah, that it just doesn't turn into something else. Yeah.
Right. Because I mean, sometimes that can work depending on what it is. I'm thinking like Queen Sugar, The book Queen Sugar is not like the TV series.
No, not at all.
Not at all, but it works.
Yeah. It's interesting that you would use that as an example, because when I read the book Queen Sugar, I didn't like it. And I'm not sure why I didn't like it. I think, and this is going to sound like really ridiculous now that I know who the character is, but I just had a problem with the name Ralph Angel. It just bothered me for some reason that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And every time I came across it, I would just get annoyed. And, you know, and I to this day, I have never finished reading the book. And, you know, so you know, people like and dislike things for all sorts of strange reasons. And that is some inexplicable reason why I just never finished that book. And I think in the book, the way that they had, I guess it's the Charlie character from the TV series, why she came back. And you know, I was like, really? You know, I don't get it. And so I never connected to the characters. I think that was part of it, you know, in the novel. But who am I to say? Because look at it now, you know.
Yeah, the TV show is great. That's my favorite television show. So yeah, I mean, it's just you never really know. So
yeah, with somebody who's piece of work, yeah.
Right, exactly. You know, take the skeleton and just add all kinds of meat to it. So you just never know. So of course I know that you do teach. You know, you do teach during the day. You mentioned earlier to me that you just started back. So what types of things, I know you teach writing. Are there any courses that are available to people who might not be a student, or is that specifically what you do right now for Medgar Evers?
Yeah, so I'm faculty. So it's, you know, whatever the curriculum is for, you know, the city universities. So I teach composition, entry-level composition, second year composition. I teach professional writing. So for those students that want to make a career of writing in some form or fashion, so I teach one of those courses. I'm just developing a class that I am hoping will come through. It's sexuality, gender, and the Black romance novel.
Good.
So that proposal is in, so we'll see if it gets through. So I got some early feedback that the curriculum committee likes it. So, you know, but, you know, doing anything with any kind of city organization is always, you know, a Herculean task. You know, so it goes to this committee, and then it goes to the next committee, and then it has to be approved here, and then somebody has to sign off, and then you have to fix it, and it goes back. So, you know, maybe before I retire, they'll you know, put the course together and, you know, have people take it. So I teach that. I've taught a couple of fiction writing courses as well. Those have been the classes that I've taught while I was there. You know, I did adjunct work at another college in New Jersey. So I've taught, you know, Caribbean literature, American history, African-American history, you know, Western literature. So basically, you know, the whole gamut, you know, of English writing and reading courses that I've been teaching. So, yeah.
Oh, that class you're talking about sounds awesome. And actually kind of segues into one of my questions, because you are known as a pioneer in the African-American romance genre. How has that journey been for you, you know, from the early days to now, just getting in and being seen and being able to tell our stories and in ways that aren't, what can I say? What word should I use? Telling our stories in a way that there is actual romance, there's love, you know, there's relationship. How has that journey been for you as one of the pioneers in this particular genre?
I mean, when I first started writing, back in, 88, 89, Black romance wasn't a thing, right? You couldn't go into your local bookstore and find Black romances tumbling over themselves on the shelves because they just weren't there. So at the time that I started writing, I believe there was like less than a half dozen Black romances that had ever been published, like in history, like period, like ever.
Wow.
And, I was of the notion that the reason why I didn't see them is because nobody was writing them. And what it was that the publishing industry was not interested in publishing them because of all of the, the myths about the Black reader, that one, we don't read. And two, if we do read, you might as well read what we want you to read, which is our stuff. It was difficult. I kind of tumbled into being a romance writer. It wasn't something that I said, oh, this is what I'm going to do with myself. I started off writing short stories for the romance magazines. And that's kind of how I started. And the editor who was working with me at the time, after I was doing them for a while, she was saying, your stories are getting to be too long and you should think about writing a book. You gotta be crazy. From 12, 15 pages to 200 pages. I can't do it. Just think about it in pieces. Don't think about, oh, I've got to do this. Think about this chapter and this scene and just build. And she was extremely supportive, Nathasia Brooks Harris. And so I did, I followed her advice. I started working on this story. I was working at a architectural company at the time. And the characters in my book, my hero was an architect and my heroine was an interior designer, because we also housed an interior design firm within our offices. So that became the characters. And so I started writing this story, and Nathasia took me to my very first writers conference, and I met with an editor. And for those people who have ever gone to a writers conference and you're pitching your story, you generally have an opportunity to talk to an editor about your book. So in this instance, you send your story ahead of time so that by the time you meet with the editor, they've already had a chance to go over, your first 3 chapters or whatever. So I did. I met with the editor. The editor told me, that she thought it was a good story. I might want to soften up my heroine a little bit. I don't know what that means up until today. That I might want to soften up my heroine a little bit. And then she asked me if my characters had to be Black.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes, they do. Wow.
So I was like, well, yeah, so she's like, I'm not telling you to change it or anything, but if you do, I'll be happy to take a look at your manuscript again. I was like, well, I'll be damned. Okay, lady. So this was, this was not, Deep South Mississippi in 1940.
Right.
This was like 1989 Midtown Manhattan.
Wow.
So, and, quiet as it's kept, that was and still is the biggest worldwide publishers of romance novels, like in the world, period. Right. So they still rank that. This was an editor from that house.
Gotcha.
Okay. So I was like, wow, I guess I'll never get published. Because if they don't, like, who will? So, but I wasn't quite deterred. And, I started doing some research and I found Crown Publishing. And I was like, oh, they'll do romances. And so back then you could like pick up a phone and you could call an editor and talk to them on the phone. So I called I found the telephone number and the name and everything. And I called, and the editor was like, "Oh, the book sounds wonderful." Because, you know, we can sound however we want to sound on the phone, right?
Right.
So, you know, I did my whole code switching thing, and, you know, I pitched my story, and she said, "Oh, it sounds wonderful. You know, please send it to me, blah, blah, blah." I send it. A few weeks later, I get an envelope with one of those, like, you know, mini note things.
Mm-hmm.
"Thank you for your submission. This does not meet our needs."
Mm-hmm.
It met our needs a few weeks ago, but you didn't realize that my characters were Black. So I called her again. So I called her back. I said, "You know, I just received your note. I'm a new writer. You know, how can I know how to do better if you don't tell me what's wrong?" And she says, "I'll be perfectly honest with you. If we're going to publish any Black romances, they have to be better than anything else that we're doing." And I was like,
okay, well, we always have to be better, right?
Exactly. So, you know, so at that point, I just kind of figured, well, you know, this whole writing a romance thing is, you know, out the window. And I was reading a magazine, the Writer's Market magazine, and in the back there was where they have all the ads and stuff, and there was this little ad that was for Odyssey Books in Silver Springs, Maryland, and they were looking to launch their company, and they were looking for Black romances written by Black people.
Wow.
Like, so I send my story off. You know, I had maybe the first 5 chapters or whatever it was. I send it off, and I send my little cover letter, and, you know, because that's, you had to do everything in the mail then. You couldn't do the whole email, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Email, and I get a letter back from the publisher, and she says, "We love your story. We want to publish it. Send us the rest." But I didn't have the rest because I never read the rest because nobody wanted it. So I was like, oh my God. So, you know, I'm furiously writing, and, you know, I write this letter, you know, I get into my whole fiction head, and I'm like, okay, well, you know, I'm still working on the end, and I'm really not satisfied, and I'm trying to make some changes. It was like, you know, and I send that letter off, and I'm furiously writing, you know, I'm going to work, and I'm writing on the train on the morning, I'm typing at night, because back I didn't have a computer. I was typing on a typewriter, you know, you know, carbon paper and the whole thing. So I finally
white out, retyping,
white out, you know, all that. Yes. So I finally got it done. I sent it in. And that was Rooms of the Heart. And Rooms of the Heart was the first book out of Odyssey Books. Launched my career, launched Frances Ray's career. Sandra Kitt, she published her second Black romance out of Odyssey Books. Ebony Snow, Margie Walker. There was a whole bunch of us that sort of like came up out of that era. And we became successful, and publishers started realizing, oh, Black people really do read these books, and Black women will buy them. And absolutely. So Kensington said, wow, maybe we should do a line of Black books. And they launched Arabesque, and the rest is history.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I mean, there's so many things in that, you know, just the fact of you starting, you being told no, and saying, hey, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep finding that place where I can tell my stories, where people are going, you know, want to hear. And the fact that, you know, you knew where to go and get the information so that you could find what you were looking for, you know, by looking in the writer's market and things like that. So that's just, you know, I wanted you to share that, because there are people, I'm sure, that either listening now or who will listen later that may be interested in writing in romance or any type of writing, really. And just to understand that, you know, if you stick to it, if you believe in what you're doing and keep doing it, and that all kinds of things can happen. Now, you know, over 100 stories later, you know, here we are. So your persistence, determination, belief in self paid off. Absolutely, Paula. Absolutely. And we wouldn't be sitting here today if you wouldn't have done that. So we appreciate that. And, as I said, for anyone out there, whether it's writing or, whatever it is, that's important. Now, I'm not sure who this is, but someone saying a private affair will always.
Yes. Oh my God, Quentin Parker. Oh. Yes.
All right.
That's a whole nother session. Just talking about a private affair, how that turned out, why it turned out. That was the first. Okay. That was the first book that I ever did a series of. So like 3 other books afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. We'll see you again. You see love in the room. Some love in the room. Some real fans here. So, well, we know that, you've been, doing a lot, and, this has been the focus for quite a while. The Confessions in B flat. I believe it came out in November, if I remember correctly. November, sometime late last year. So I know there's still promotion with that. So besides getting back to work and continuing to promote this, what else do you have going on, Donna?
Oh, Lord. Well, right now I'm working on my next novel. It's called I Am Aya, The Way Home. And it is about a young woman who is forced to return back to her home in Sag Harbor. But she is sort of plagued by the sort of like the spiritual energy of her ancestors. And one of her ancestors was on the Amistad.
Wow.
And she was the one that actually freed Sinke so that he could have the revolt. So that's at least in my version. And so that is her like great grandmother. And so the story sort of goes back and forth between my contemporary character and her foremothers, and the story of their survival, their endurance at different time periods throughout history, and how all of those things helped to shape her and bring her back to where she needed to be. So it's a story of discovery. There's a lot of this is a lot of history stuff that I have to kind of.
I'm like, woo! I love it.
So I said like reworking family trees and timelines and who was where and during what time period. So the other voices, they're not going to have like whole big chunks of the book, but they're going to be dispersed throughout. As she's making these different, discoveries about, herself and her past that she has to come to terms with, because she thinks she's coming to come to terms with her dad, but it's so much more than that. So it's all about coming.
That sounds really good. And we have a question from Karen that she said she had to jump off and come back on. She said, did you want to know how long it took you to write Confessions in B flat?
Once I started writing, it probably took about maybe 5 months to write it. Okay. And then we went through several rounds of editing. So that was more writing and rewriting and things like that. The actual book itself took probably about 5 months to write. Because I was supposed to have done it like a long time ago, and like all sorts of stuff happened to get it done.
Right.
Was that once I started writing, it took about that long. But like all of the heavy lifting, which was the research, was done before I started the work. So the project in and of itself probably took anywhere from 6 to 9 months in totality to put together, with the research, the writing, and things like that. And then we went into editing, because the book was actually finished. This is 2021. It came out last year. The book was actually finished in 2019.
Oh, okay.
And so Then we went through all of the editing, fact checking, all that type of stuff. And right up until November, when the book was getting ready to go to print, we still had to get permissions for some of the pictures. So some of the left out because we couldn't get permissions at the last minute. So we had to get different types of approval and things like that. So it took a while, to put it together. I do have a book coming out from Harlequin. I think it'll be out this fall. Strictly Confidential. And it is actually the third book in the Grants of DC series. So anybody that followed the Grant brothers from DC, this is the last brother, the youngest brother, his story.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to put this back up because someone was asking for your information. So let's see here. This thing does what it wants to do. There we go. So this is Donna Hill. One last quick question about the writing process, and then I have a couple things to finish out the night. Karen also asked, do you use outlines for your writing?
I always, before I start writing, I always have what I call my synopsis. So it's usually that's that document that I use to sell a story to a publisher. And it basically tells my story. So I use that as my foundation always. Some people, I don't know, they work without one. I can't, because I need to have some sort of idea of where I'm going and what it is that I'm doing. It keeps me from having blocks and things like that by having an outline. And, a lot of times people think that, you have an outline and, you can't deviate and it's going to, strip you of your creativity and blah, blah, blah. That's really not, that's for me. It's not true. Because you still have to create, you still have to craft the scenes, you have to get into the characters' heads. But it's just sort of like, when I teach writing classes, I always tell students that your synopsis is think of it as your GPS, right? How often do you get in your car? You don't know where you're going. So you turn on your GPS to guide you. Yeah, you might have to, and you might have to get off the road to go to the bathroom or stop off and get something to eat. But you're going to get back on track because you know the direction that you're heading in, especially if it's someplace that you haven't been before. And that's kind of like the way that I look at, outlines. So it's actually the story. Like I tell the story from beginning to end. Like I always know how my story is going to end before I start writing. I always know where I'm going. So it's like filling in the stuff in between. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. And Karen says, thank you for answering her questions. You are appreciated, and you are appreciated. So, you've told us what you're working on. Let me scroll how to get in touch with you again and keep up with all the stuff you've got going on. And I want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been a pleasure, and I will definitely, we'll stay in touch. You know how to get in touch. And, let us know you have some other things coming up, because as I mentioned, one of the things about BGC Book Club, it is a way for us to share Black female or Black, women who are writers, authors. And it is indeed a pleasure to be able to bring people who write different types of things, because everybody does not necessarily read the same thing. And to be able to introduce, whether it's romance or historical fiction or nonfiction. Last month, my days run together. Last month we read Cicely Tyson's memoir. I mean, we do a lot of different things here. So again, with some of the other things you have coming up. So thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate
it. No problem. Now, for those of you who are still in the room, and this includes you, Donna, I am going to go ahead and announce our next book for, let me take this stuff down, the book for next month. And we will be reading, if it comes up here for me, Liberty by Caitlin Greenidge. This is the book that we will be reading for next month. Next month, we normally do it on the first Monday. Next month, it will actually be on the first Tuesday. I had to work with Miss Greenidge's schedule, so she will definitely be here, and we'll get a chance to talk about her new book, which just came out last week. It is a historical novel. Basically, it's about a young girl and her mother who are physicians back in Reconstruction era Brooklyn. So, hey, Brooklyn, your hometown. But it takes place in Reconstruction.
Funny that you should mention that. I just ordered that book today.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So hopefully you can join us. Come hang with us. And
I would love to see her. Oh my goodness.
Yes. I just confirmed today that she'll be able to join us on May the 4th. So this is our next book for next month. And there's some other things going on too. But before I get to those other things for next month, for those of you who are normally here, or if it's your first time, I always give away a copy of the next month's book when we meet. So I would like to go ahead and have everybody, and this includes you, Donna, put a number from 1 to 60 in the chat. And I'm going to pull one, and whoever wins, just send me either through the BGC Book Club if you're there, or through Brown Girl Collective, just send me a message. Whoever wins, I will make sure we get the book out to you. So, all right, let's see here. Just getting my numbers and my phone. Why does my phone always ring when I'm busy? I'm like, me. Okay. All righty. So let's see here. All right. Oh, you're welcome. Someone saying, thank you for introducing us to so many good books and authors. You have helped me through the pandemic. You're welcome. Hey, I've helped me through the pandemic. Yes, we've been around, Donna. We've been around. I started last year in April. Our first couple of guests were poets. So yeah, your book kind of ties in because it is National Poetry Month.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm working to get some poets on in a couple of weeks. So that is one of the things that's coming up. So, okay, I'm trying to see what number. Well, the number that I pulled is, and I said 1 to 60, but the number I pulled is 61, so that's close enough. Let me see. It looks like I have a Facebook user. Not sure who that is. Number 56. It is you. You have won a copy of Liberty by Caitlin Greenidge. So just send me a message either through the BGC Book Club if you're in the BGC Book Club, or you can send it through the Brown Girl Collective Facebook page, and I will make sure to get the book out to you as soon as possible so you have time to read it. So thank you. That's coming up that's May the 4th. Some of you may know, I don't think I posted it on the main Brown Girl Collective page yet, but a friend of mine and I are going to do another book on May the 11th. And we will be doing The Three Mothers, which talks about Malcolm and Martin. Oh, yeah, we're all in your stuff. We're all in your town, the people that you wrote. But yes, we're gonna, and it'll just be my friend Faye and we're gonna talk about The Three Mothers on May the 11th. I'll make sure that I post that as well. That one will be a little earlier in the day, so you may have to catch it on a replay because I think it's gonna be at like 5 o'clock, and some people will still be, making their way home from work. So that's on May the 11th. And last but not least for now, on May the 24th, I believe it is, Trey Anthony will be with us for Black Girl in Love with Herself. I actually did an interview with her last Thursday, and it's for a new thing that I started called Live Well Sister, where we talk about Black women and wellness in a lot of different areas of wellness. And it was kind of an overview, but she's going to come back and we'll do a private deep dive into her book because this is kind of a self-help thing. So we'll be able to talk to her and ask some questions. Oh, okay. All right. I see Sally was number 56. Okay, that is a family friend. So congratulations, Sally Benjamin, on winning another book. She wins a lot because she reads a lot. So those are some of the things coming up. And there are, several other things. I have been busy behind the scenes trying to, set some things up for both the book club and just in general, because I love my sisters and I want to be able to support you in any way that I can. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you again, Donna, for being here with us. And I look forward to seeing you again. I'm going to shoot you an email, so I got a quick question for you offline, but I look forward to seeing you again and being able to discuss more of the works that you have coming up. So,
forward. Keep me in the loop.
Yeah. So you have a great night, everybody out there. Thank you for being with us. Have a good evening. Take good care of yourselves. Love on yourselves. And all that good stuff. And I hope to see you again real soon. Have a good night.
Marcy, make sure you reach out to me because I have a question for you too.
Okay. I'm going to shoot you an email and we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right then. Well, everybody have a good night. Thank you.
Good night.
All righty. Good night.